They told Yaba to wait outside while they read the will, not in the living room, not even in the hallway, outside, on the porch. Like she was there to fix the gutters. She didn't argue. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, sat down in the old wicker chair that had been there since before any of them were born, and she waited. That was Yaba. That had always been Yaba. Inside, through the window, she could hear the murmur of voices. The lawyer, Mr. Osi, clearing his throat. The rustle of papers. And beneath it all, the low, satisfied hum of Priscilla. Raymond's daughter-in-law, who had been organizing this day for weeks like it was her own wedding. Yaba looked out at the yard. The magnolia tree Raymond had planted the year she first came to work for him was in full bloom. White flowers, heavy and slow-dropping, the way Raymond himself had moved in his last years. She had watered that tree. She had raked its fallen petals every spring without being asked. She had done a lot of things without being asked. If you want to understand what happened that Tuesday morning in Savannah, Georgia, you have to understand who Raymond Boateng was. And to understand Raymond, you have to start 17 years earlier in a kitchen that smelled like ginger and burnt palm oil, with a man who had just buried his wife and forgotten how to eat. Raymond Boateng had come to America from Ghana in 1987 with 2 suitcases and a cousin's address in Atlanta. By the time he was 60, he had built a small empire, 3 dry cleaning shops, a commercial laundry contract with 2 hospital systems, and a 4-bedroom house in the Ardsley Park neighborhood of Savannah that his wife Abina had chosen and that he could no longer stand to be in after she died. Abina passed on a Thursday in October. By the following Monday, Raymond had stopped eating real meals. His son Desmond lived 40 minutes away in Pooler with Priscilla and their 2 kids. They came on weekends sometimes, when it wasn't too far, when there wasn't a soccer game or a school thing or something Priscilla had already planned. It was Desmond who hired Yaba, not out of love, out of logistics. He needed someone to make sure his father didn't fall, didn't burn the house down, didn't forget his blood pressure medication 3 days in a row. He found her through a church referral. A Ghanaian woman, mid-30s, quiet, reliable, recently arrived from Accra after a marriage that had ended before it properly began. Her name was Yaba Mensima. She showed up on a Wednesday morning in November with flat shoes and a notebook. Raymond barely looked at her. He pointed at the kitchen and said, "There's food in there somewhere," and went back to his chair by the window. She found the kitchen in a state that told its own story. Take-out containers stacked beside an unused stove, a pot with something hardened at the bottom that had been soaking for days, a fruit bowl with 2 wrinkled oranges that nobody had touched. She threw away what needed throwing. She washed what needed washing. She found rice, found onions, found a piece of dried fish, tucked in the back of the cabinet, the way Ghanaian pantries always have something tucked in the back. And she cooked. Raymond smelled it before he heard her say anything. He came to the doorway of the kitchen, the way a man comes to a sound he recognizes but wasn't expecting. Slowly, like he didn't want to disturb it. "Is that Contamire?" he said. "Yes," Yaba said. "I found the cocoyam leaves in the freezer." He stood there a moment. "Abena used to make that, I know. Your neighbor Mrs. Patterson told me. She said your wife was a very good cook." Raymond sat down at the kitchen table, the first time he had eaten at the table, not the window chair, since the funeral. He didn't say anything. He just ate. And when he was finished, he sat with his hands folded around the bowl and looked at the table and said, quietly, "Thank you." That was the beginning. Over the following months, Yaba learned the architecture of Raymond's grief, the way you learn the layout of a house you've moved into, room by room, careful of the dark corners. He didn't want to talk about Abina in the mornings. He was fine by afternoon. He needed the TV off after 9. He slept better if someone had checked the locks. He liked to hear the radio in the kitchen while he read. Not loud, just there, just the knowledge of another presence in the house. She learned all of this without being told. She just paid attention. That was the whole of it. Desmond called on Sundays to check in. His calls lasted about 7 minutes. Yaba knew, because she had noticed the pattern without meaning to. Raymond's voice was always slightly more careful after those calls, like a man recalibrating. "My son is busy," Raymond told her once, not as a complaint, just as a fact he had arranged inside himself so it fit. "Yes," Yaba said, "he has his life. I understand that. Yes, his wife," Raymond paused. "Priscilla is. She's a very organized woman." Yaba didn't say anything to that. Some things you let breathe. The first time Priscilla came to the house after Yaba was hired, she walked through every room with the measured attention of someone taking inventory. She smiled at Yaba the way people smile at objects that are perfectly functional, but will need to be replaced eventually. She told Raymond the house could use some updating. She asked Yaba, twice, if she had her work authorization papers in order. She brought a casserole that nobody ate. On the drive home, Priscilla told Desmond that his father's housekeeper seemed to have made herself very comfortable. Desmond didn't think much of that sentence at the time. He would think about it later. Years move the way years do. Faster than they should, slower than you want, different depending on which end you're standing on. Yaba became, without ceremony or announcement, indispensable, not just to Raymond's meals and medications, but to his days. She drove him to his doctor appointments and wrote down what the doctors said, because Raymond's hearing wasn't what it was. She sat with him while he watched old Ghanaian films on a streaming service his grandson had set up, the two of them on the sofa with their separate blankets, laughing at the same parts. She called his sister in Kumasi every other Sunday and held the phone for him when his hands shook. She fixed what could be fixed and called someone for what couldn't, and never once made him feel diminished by needing her. Raymond started calling her my daughter in conversation. Not to her face, he was too formal for that. But when he spoke of her to others. "My daughter Yaba," he would say. She arranged that. His actual daughter-in-law found out. Priscilla called Desmond. From the parking lot of a Whole Foods in Pooler, her voice at the particular temperature it reached when she had identified a problem that needed immediate solving. "Your father is calling the housekeeper his daughter," she said. "Did you know that?" Desmond said he didn't think it was a big deal. Priscilla said she thought it was, actually, quite a significant deal. "She's an employee, Des. She works there. And your father is an old man who gets confused sometimes, and she knows that, and I just think—" "He doesn't get confused," Desmond said. A silence, the kind of silence that has weight. "I just think," Priscilla said, more carefully, "that we should be more involved in his day-to-day. That's all I'm saying." What she meant, and what Desmond understood but did not say out loud, was more involved than she is. Raymond had a bad winter when he was 76. Pneumonia that turned into a hospital stay, that turned into a longer hospital stay than anyone had expected. Desmond came. Priscilla came once, briefly, and brought flowers that nobody had a vase for. Yaba stayed. She slept in the chair beside his hospital bed for 4 nights, going home only to shower and change. The nurses knew her by name. She knew which attending physician to call when Raymond's oxygen levels dropped at 2 a.m., and the overnight resident seemed uncertain. She knew because she had done her research. She had read about his condition the same way she had read the instruction manual for his new blood pressure monitor. Thoroughly, seriously, like the information mattered. Raymond came home thinner and tired and deeply, privately grateful. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the hospital, he called Yaba into the sitting room and said, I want to tell you something. She sat down across from him. He had his hands folded in his lap. He looked at them before he looked at her. When I was in that hospital, he said, there were nights I was not sure I would see the morning. And each time, he stopped. Started again. Each time I thought about what waited for me, the first thing I saw was this house. Not the house. You in the house. Do you understand? Raymond? I am not confused, he said. I know exactly what I am saying. I want you to know that you have been. You are. He cleared his throat. You are the best thing that came into this house after Abina left it, and I don't say that lightly. Yaba sat with that for a moment. Then she said, you should eat. I made groundnut soup. Raymond laughed, really laughed. That's all you have to say? It will get cold. He laughed again, and that was the conversation. That was all of it. But you don't need more than that, when the words have been chosen carefully enough. Raymond Boateng passed on a Saturday in March, at home, in his own bed, with the radio on in the kitchen and the magnolia just beginning to show its first white blossoms of the season. He was 79. Yaba had been with him the previous evening. She had made him tea, fixed his pillows, and sat with him while he told her a story she had heard 3 times before, about the day he opened his first dry cleaning shop, and the iron broke an hour before his first customer arrived. She laughed in all the right places. Then she said, good night, turned off the light and left. He was gone by morning. The overnight aide found him. The expression on his face, the aide said later, was like a man who had simply decided to stop. Desmond handled the arrangements. Priscilla handled Desmond. The funeral was held the following Thursday at the First African Baptist Church on Montgomery Street. One of the oldest black churches in America, Raymond had always said so with quiet pride. Half of Savannah's Ghanaian community came. Former employees came. A man from Atlanta, who Raymond had lent money to in 1994 and never asked to be repaid, came and cried the hardest of anyone. Yaba came in her good dress, the dark blue one she kept for occasions that required dignity. She sat near the back. She was not asked to speak. She had not expected to be. It was after the service, in the fellowship hall, that Priscilla found her. Priscilla was in full organizational mode, black dress, low heels, clipboard of notes for the reception. She came to Yaba with a smile and a voice trained to sound warm. Yaba, thank you so much for everything. Really. Raymond was so well looked after. You should be very proud, Yaba said. Thank you. Now I know this must be a lot. Change and all. But obviously once we sort out the estate, we'll be in touch about. She paused in the way people pause when they are deciding how direct to be. About next steps. For you, I understand, Yaba said. The reading of the will is next Tuesday. Family only, obviously. But we'll make sure you're informed about anything relevant to whatever comes next for you. There it was. Family only. Yaba nodded once and said nothing. Now, before we go further, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. This community is built on stories like this one, and there are more coming. Hit that subscribe button and let's continue. The reading of the will was held at the house on a Tuesday morning in April. Desmond and Priscilla arrived first. Priscilla had already moved 3 of the kitchen chairs into the living room to set up a proper arrangement. The lawyer, Mr. Osei Kwaku, a small, meticulous man who had handled Raymond's affairs for 11 years, arrived with his briefcase precisely on time. Yaba arrived because Raymond's neighbor, old Mrs. Patterson from next door, had called to tell her about it. He would have wanted you there, Mrs. Patterson had said. That's all I know. Yaba walked up the front steps in her good dress again. Priscilla answered the door. The smile did not reach past her cheekbones. Yaba, I didn't realize. I was told Mr. Osei Kwaku would be here, Yaba said simply. Priscilla looked at Desmond. Desmond looked at his shoes. Of course, Priscilla said. Come in. But There's really not much space, so you can wait on the porch and we'll come get you if there's anything that." "The porch," Yaba repeated. "Just until we've handled the main portion. It won't be long." And that is how Yaba Mensima, who had kept Raymond Boateng's house for 17 years, who had slept in a hospital chair for 4 nights to stay close to him, who had watered the magnolia tree in the yard, and cooked the meals and held the phone and written down the doctor's words. That is how she ended up sitting on the porch, in the wicker chair, listening to the murmur of voices through the window. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at the magnolia. A petal let go and fell slowly to the grass. She waited. Inside, Mr. Osei Kwaku opened his briefcase. He set Raymond's will, the most recent version, dated 14 months prior, when Raymond was fully healthy and fully clear-minded, on the coffee table. He read the opening, the standard language, the declarations of sound mind and intention. Then he turned to the second page. Priscilla shifted forward slightly in her seat, the way a person does when they are ready to receive something. Mr. Osei Kwaku read, "The house, the 3 dry cleaning shops, the commercial laundry contracts, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio Raymond had quietly built over 30 years, the magnolia tree and the yard, and the wicker chair on the porch. All of it, every line of it, went to one person, not Desmond." Fratello made a sound that was not quite a word. Desmond's face did something complicated, something that moved through shock and confusion, and then, slowly, landed somewhere that looked almost like understanding. Mr. Osei Kwaku set the document down. He folded his hands. He looked at Desmond for a moment, and then he stood, crossed the living room, opened the front door, and stepped out onto the porch. Yaba looked up at him. "Mensima," he said. "Mr. Boateng would like you to come inside now." She stood. She straightened her dress. She walked through the front door of the house she had helped keep for 17 years, past Priscilla, who was very still in a way that people are still when they have stopped trusting their own face, past Desmond, who was looking at the floor, but whose jaw was working quietly, like a man trying to build a sentence. She sat in the empty chair. Mr. Osei Kwaku sat back down. He cleared his throat. He looked at Yaba. "Raymond Boateng," he said, "has left the entirety of his estate to you. He has also left a letter." He removed the letter from the briefcase. He set it on the table in front of her. No one spoke. Yaba looked at the envelope. Her name was written on it in Raymond's handwriting, the same handwriting she had read on grocery lists and birthday cards and the back of old photographs. "Yaba," it said. "Just Yaba." She picked it up. She did not open it in front of them. "There is a note in the will," Mr. Osei Kwaku continued, now addressing the room, in which Mr. Boateng explains his decision. He states, and I will read this section precisely. He found the page. "I have provided for my son Desmond through education, business opportunities, and financial support throughout his adult life. He has not lacked and will not lack. Yaba Mensima arrived in this house when it was emptied of its warmth, and she restored it, without obligation, without expectation, and without the kind of love that keeps receipts. She is not my housekeeper. She is my family. This estate is her home, because she made it one." The room was quiet. Priscilla stood up. She picked up her purse. She looked at her husband with an expression that communicated a great number of things very efficiently. Then she walked out. The front door closed. Desmond sat for a long moment. Then he looked up at Yaba. Really looked, maybe for the first time in 17 years. "He called you his daughter," Desmond said. "I used to think," he stopped. "I thought he was confused." "He wasn't confused," Yaba said. Desmond nodded slowly. "No, I see that now." He stood. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The Contemeyer, he used to talk about that, the first day. He said that was the day he knew." Yaba didn't say anything. Desmond picked up his jacket. At the door, he turned back one more time. He looked like a man who had a great many things to say and had realized too late that he had used up all the time he had been given to say them. "Take care of the house," he said finally. "He loved it. I know," Yaba said. "I always have." The door closed again, quieter this time. Mr. Osekwaku gathered his papers. He gave Yaba the documents she would need, explained the process, said she could call his office with any questions. He was efficient and kind. He left her with his card and a slight bow that seemed genuinely meant. And then the house was quiet. The same way it had been quiet on the day she first walked in 17 years ago, with her flat shoes and her notebook and no certainty about anything except that there was work to be done. She sat alone in the living room for a while. She held Raymond's letter in both hands. Then she got up, walked to the kitchen, and put the kettle on. While she waited for it to boil, she opened the letter. She read it once. She read it again. It was 2 pages, handwritten, in the slow and careful script of a man who had wanted to be precise. He talked about Abena, he talked about the hospital, he talked about Contamire, which made her exhale in a way that was almost a laugh. He said he had made the decision about the will 2 years ago and had slept better every night since. At the bottom, in letters slightly larger than the rest, he had written, "You never asked for a thing. That is exactly why you deserve everything." She folded the letter. She put it back in the envelope. She set it on the kitchen table, the same table where he had sat on that first Wednesday, eating Contamire in silence, finding his way back to himself. Outside, through the window, the magnolia dropped another white petal onto the grass. She poured her tea, she sat down, and in the quiet of the house that was now by every legal and moral measure, hers, Yaba Mensima, allowed herself, finally, to cry, not from sadness. Not exactly. From the particular weight of being truly seen. After years of doing the work without the title, loving without the label, staying without being asked to stay, Raymond Boateng had seen her, and in the end, he had said so in the only language that nobody could argue with. The language of a will. If this story moved you, you are not alone. The comments on stories like this one are full of people who have loved someone quietly and hoped it was enough. It always is. Share this with someone who needs to hear that today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to New African Folktales. There are more stories here waiting for you. Stories of loyalty and justice, and the kind of love that doesn't make noise but moves mountains. We'll see you in the next one.